So Mizoram, a state in the northeastern part of our country, known as the land of whispering woods, has been grappling and facing the challenge of managing a growing refugee crisis since Myanmar's 2021 military coup.
Mizoram is witnessing a huge influx of Chin refugees from Myanmar. There's a battle which is raging in Myanmar.
Now, thousands of Myanmar nationals from different ethnic minorities have been fleeing the country since the coup there in 2021.
We have 41,000 displaced people from Myanmar, Bangladesh and Manipur. We have to feed them.
Providing shelter to thousands of people from Myanmar, Bangladesh, Manipur and different other parts as well. Now, this refugee crisis has been causing a lot of problem domestically in the region and nationally for the country as well, especially for the local population living over there. Now, this is Mizoram and Azawal is the capital of it. Now, Mizoram shares a 722 kilometer, that is 449 miles of international border with Bangladesh to the west and Myanmar to the east and south, with the domestic borders with Indian states of Assam, Manipur and Tripura. And it covers a total area of 21,081 square kilometers. Now, within a week from July 3rd of 2025, over 4,000 refugees from Myanmar's Chin state has crossed into Mizoram's Champai district, and this has exacerbated the refugee crisis in the region. Now, what this refugee crisis is all about, what are the ramifications for it in relation to the state and for the country, what are the laws governing it, what are the constitutional provisions in relation to it, and what is this free movement regime which everyone keeps on talking about in relation to Mizoram and the other and our neighboring states as well, we'll be trying to understand in this particular session. Hello, my name is Pal Singh and you're watching Perspective. Without beating around the bush, let's try to understand what happened in July of 2025. So after July 3rd of 2025, within a week, around 4,000 people, refugees from Myanmar's Chin state has crossed and come into Mizoram's Champai district. Now this has happened after a fierce gunfight between two anti-junta groups in the Myanmar region. Now these two are the armed groups. One is the Chin National Defence Force, CNDF, and one is Chinland Defence Force, H. Now these two groups are a part of People's Defence Force, which is aligned with the pro-democracy National Unity Government of Myanmar, which has now seized control over large parts of the Chin state from the junta over the past few months. Now, this is a faction. These two are the groups which are part of this larger group known as People Defence Force. And there has been a gunfight between these two groups, which is why more than 4,000 people from Myanmar in the Chin state has now come to Mizoram as refugees. Now, if we see Mizoram, a part of the northeast India, present-day people in Mizoram are used to the Myanmar nationals moving in and out of the country even before this free movement regime, which took place in the year 1968, came into force. Even before that, Myanmar nationals came in and out of Mizoram for hundreds and thousands of years. And then came this free movement regime, which altered the whole scenario of a movement of people from Myanmar to Mizoram in and out of the state recurringly. See, first of all, the question is that how Mizoram has been able to manage influx of such huge numbers of refugees over the last many years. To understand that, we have to understand the ethnic background of the people of Mizoram. See, the cross-border movement between the people of Myanmar and people of Mizoram, geographically also you can see that since they belong to a common tribe, since they belong to common ethnicity, common culture, the movement between these two areas, people in these two areas is quite common. Now, Mizoram's dominant community is Mizo community. That is why the name Mizoram. Now, this community, it shares a very distinct, a very close ethnic, cultural and familial bonds with the Chin people of Myanmar. So, which means the Mizo people of Mizoram and the Chin people of Myanmar, they share ethnic bond, they share familial bonds and cultural bonds in a very deep level. Also, not just this, the Mizo community, they share great levels of bond with the Bom community of Bangladesh and Kuki-Zo community of Manipur as well, because all of them are belonging to a wider ethnic group known as Zo ethnic group, which is why this shared identity between all these communities have given them a shared sense of solidarity as well. Now, they might be divided on the basis of geographies, on the basis of line drawn on maps, but still, if we go on land, if we go to their territories, practically if we see, all these communities are very closely knit to each other, with most of the people knowing knowing each other, and most of the communities and families knowing each other and tracing back their cultural and familial bonds since last many decades and centuries. And which is why Mizos, they extend a lot of support, a lot of sympathy, a lot of empathy for the refugees, especially those who come from the Myanmar, because all of them, they share unique cultural identity and common cultural bonds, common shared identities as well. And also alongside this, one thing you'll be shocked to know is that the Mizoram government also is having a very sympathetic stance on this. Rather than deporting the refugees, Mizoram government also helps the refugees, which means they cite ethnic and humanitarian reasons, which is why they've said that they have been refraining from deporting refugees until unless they get a safe passage and the situation in their home country is safe. Also, other than that, central government has also time and again helped the local government of Mizoram, sometimes by giving them grants. Recent the grant of 8 crore rupees was given, but of course there is dissatisfaction which is shown by the local people in relation to the help which the central government is doing to this Mizoram government. Also, if you have to understand the response of Mizoram against this particular crisis, you can see it in different fronts. First is the relief provided by the people of Mizoram. That is, Mizoram governments and volunteers, they've set up temporary camps for the people, which means YMA chapters and church groups, they have established several langars, they've established distribution of rice, blankets, meals, medicines to these people, and several community outreach programs have also been done, which is why the people have shown sympathy to the Chin people who are coming from Myanmar to India, that is Mizoram. Other than that, massive data collection exercise is also going on. So a Home Ministry funded data collection exercise of around 35,000 refugees who are taking shelter in Mizoram using India's foreigner ID system has also been done. Alongside that, Indian government has also been making sure that border security is also ramped up and any illegal crossing should be not allowed, although officials say that the completion might take several years to finish. So it might take a lot of years to finish this whole border fencing project because the borders are very porous. But one peculiar thing which I've earlier also told you, that the Mizoram government has restrained from deporting or any of the individuals citing humanitarian grounds. And they've kept an open approach until unless the situation in the country gets better, they can remain in Mizoram itself. Mizoram has the capacity to accommodate them all. But as you know, this might be the stance of many of the people, but not all of the people. Which is why there are two contradictory stances. Some people, or many people to an extent, they support the refugees because of the common ethnicity, common clan. But there are many villages, many people who are opposing it as well, citing the reason that it is stressing out their resources, putting a lot of stress in already scarce resource in the region. So you have to understand it objectively as well. Mizoram's population is around 1.2 million people. Now handling around 30 to 35,000 people as refugees, which means around 3% of their residents, quickly will strain their resources. It will strain their food resources, it will strain their public services, the resources of the state, which should be going to the welfare of the locals, might alter and go to different other areas as well. And also it might create a lot of law and order problems, like a lot of criminal situations might also be created, and unruly elements in the society can also be lingering, and a threat to national security also to an extent could be seen because of this. So while ethnic solidarity is definitely good, it is there at one place, but other than that, national security, regional security concerns also needs to be taken care of. Now, since we have understood the situation in Mizoram, let us very quickly try to understand what are the legal ramifications, what are the constitutional provisions, and what are the laws governing any such refugee crisis in our country, because that is something which we need to know. So first of all, we need to understand what do you mean by the term refugee. Now, as per the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the 1967 Protocol thereon, a refugee is someone who is outside their country of origin and is unable or unwilling to return due to well-founded fear of persecution. That is a person who would be considered as a refugee. Now, this fear of persecution might be based on their race, religion, and nationality, membership to a particular social group, or a political opinion. Now, other than that, there is a definition of asylum seeker also. Asylum seeker is a person who claims to be a refugee or whose claim to the refugee status is yet to be ascertained, is yet to be adjudicated. And one very important thing to note here is that refugees are not illegal immigrants, according to the UN Convention, because illegal immigrants, they voluntarily cross the border in search of better economic opportunities, not because of the fear of persecution. They are not illegal immigrants. They are the people who, due to fear of persecution, have changed the territory, have moved to the territory and moved to another country. The question is, what about Indian laws? So India is not a signatory to this 1951 UN Convention on Refugees and also the 1967 Protocol as well. And it does not have any national refugee law of its own also. So we are not a signatory to any international refugee refugee law. We are not a signatory to any convention also. We are not a signatory to the protocol, and we do not have national refugee law as well. But still, the refugees in our country are governed by a particular act, that is Foreigner Act of 1946. And also the cases related to refugees are dealt with the different other laws in relation to immigration and national security, which includes your Indian Passport Act of 1920, the Repatriation of Prisoners Act 2003, and the relevant rules such as the Passport Entry into India rules of 1950 and different other laws concerning our national security and concerning citizenship. Also, one thing which you should know is that since independence, India has welcomed a lot of refugees and has accepted various groups of refugees from neighboring countries. First was the partition refugees from Pakistan in 1947, then the Tibetan refugees which came to our country in 1959, then Chakma and Hajong from the present day Bangladesh in the early 1960s, and also other Bangladeshi refugees came in 1965 and 1971. Then Sri Lankan Tamilian refugees also from 1980s onwards came into country. We have accepted them also. And most recently, many of the Rohingya refugees also from Myanmar who came in 2022, those also we have accepted some of them to an extent. But as I've told you that there is no specific refugee law, which is why Indian government uses a lot of different other laws which I've already stated before in order to ascertain the refugee status of a person, and should the person be given the refugee status and eventually the citizenship based on the Citizenship Amendment Act or not. Now, since we are discussing about the legalities and laws, one more policy of the government of India in relation to Mizoram and the free movement passage, which I earlier discussed with you, was in relation to free movement passage regime. Now, since I've told you that the ethnic connection between the Mizoram people and the Myanmar region is very deep, which is why in 1968 there was a bilateral agreement between India and Myanmar, which allowed the tribal members, the hill tribal members, to cross the border from either side, and it aimed to maintain the cross-border cultural ties, also to enable the trade between the communities, and also to support then India's Act East policy. Earlier time it was the Look East policy, now it became the Act East policy. Now earlier the limit was 40 km, which allowed the residents to travel up to 40 km inside our country. But eventually the limit was reduced to only 16 km in the year 2004, and eventually several other regulations came into force and were enforced in the year 2016. And finally, the central government announced the suspension of this free movement regime in February of 2024. But there has been no official notification or bilateral agreement in this regard which has been made. Apart from this, Ministry of Home Affairs brought a new notification with a fresh protocol in December 2024 to limit the kilometers to just 10 kilometers. So the free movement is now limited to 10 kilometers. Of course, it has been suspended from February 2024 till now. So according to the free movement regime, the border residents, they can travel without any visa, they can travel without any passport inside each of the countries, but they would require a QR code enabled border pass through which they can cross the border. Also, biometric data is recorded, it's upgraded to the centralized portal against a negative list, which means the people who are not allowed. And despite its goals, as every other thing has, it is also having its negative impact as well. There are security related concerns which have been highlighted multiple times due to this free movement regime. There have been smuggling related concerns, there have been migration related concerns as well, which is why tighter controls have been enforced by the government and more efforts are being done by the government, including more fencing, better data and better segregation of the individuals who are allowed to go, who are not allowed to go. Now, answering the final question, while this is a problem, there are certain laws also solving the problem. How to solve this particular crisis? See, refugees coming into our country, us accepting the refugees is okay. But see, India is a country with a population of 1.4 billion people. Now, India is having a lot of neighbors which are not in good state. Whether it be Pakistan, whether it be Bangladesh, whether it be Myanmar, a lot of India's neighbors are not in a very good state. Which is why what we need to ensure is that we need to have a proper refugee-related law. We need to have a proper strategy, not just for Mizoram, but for different other regions like Assam, like Manipur, like Mizoram, like Tripura, or different other regions of the northeastern country. See, because northeastern part of our country is very, very critical. It is a hotbed of smuggling, it is a hotbed of terrorist activities and extremist activities as well. Insurgent groups are also very active in that region, which is why, not adding to any other problem in the region, at least we should try to control the refugee crisis. Otherwise, law and order issues are also humongous in that particular region. Not talking about them, we need to first focus on the local population. Whatever is going on in Myanmar, our sympathies are definitely there with the people. Whatever is going on in Bangladesh, again, our sympathies to the people, local population. But still, what we need to ensure is that anyone who crosses the border should be crossing it legally. And of course, this free movement regime, which the chief minister has also criticized, has said that because of this free movement regime, there has been increase in the smuggling activities in the Mizoram region. And it also said that multiple people from Myanmar has used this free movement regime to repeatedly cross the border by violating Indian laws, which is why he has also urged the government of India to obtain the presidential assent for the Mizoram Maintenance of Household Registers Bill, which is to identify foreigners in the state and then eventually deport them. So yes, we need to have a sympathetic, empathetic stance. We need to have our own law governing the refugee crisis in the state, governing the refugee crisis in the northeastern part of the country, which is why we need to ensure national security to the prime, national security to the max, and we need to ensure law and order in the region also, so that the lives of the local population can be made better, their living standard can be improved, and the facilities and the resources which they deserve, which belong to them, should be consumed by them. See, one is internally we need to fix on this in relation to certain laws, in relation to certain administrative measures we need to take, but internationally as well, we need to talk with our counterparts. We need to sit down and talk with Myanmar. We need to sit down and talk with Bangladesh in order to ensure that such type of crisis never takes place in future, and such type of crisis is done away with in a very amicable way. Our response to such crisis should be very quick, should be very calculated, and should be preempted. Only then the ambition of a secure, safe, prosperous and healthy nation would be successful. I hope you gained a new perspective from this session. Now, what are your views surrounding this growing refugee crisis in India, and what can be done to solve this problem in different fronts of our country? I'll be very happy to read your comments. All the very best. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.